There was a story in last month's edition of Reader's Digest, a small story about a young man who was teaching his little boy named Nick, just 3 years old, about anger management. Apparently he was having some temper tantrums, and he was teaching him, when you get angry, count to 10. And so it wasn't long before he had another one of his temper tantrums, and so his father said, "Nick, count to 10. And so little Nick started counting. 1, 2, 3, and he went on. But he didn't stop at 10. 11, 12. And then he stopped. And then there was this look between father and son, and this pause. And then little Nick looked at his dad and he said, with a serious tone, "Some people have to count to 12. Anger management. You know, St. Paul is giving us a little bit about anger management in the second reading. And I want to focus a little bit about the second reading today from his letter to the Ephesians. You know, he's saying, get rid of bitterness, fury. You know, we don't hear that word too often, fury. Get rid of the fury, the anger, you know, the shouting, the rivalry. And it's more than just anger management that St. Paul is saying here. What St. Paul is doing is he wants us to get to a neutral state, a homeostasis, where we can get to a place of calm and of peace so that we can be imitators of God. Now, when I was looking at that word earlier this week and kind of praying over that, I was thinking, wow, imitators of God. Now, how in the world can we be imitators of God? And yet, that was St. Paul's exhortation to us. Be imitators of God. You know, St. Clement of Alexandria, he was one of the church fathers of the 2nd century. He even took it a step further. In one of his pastoral letters, he was saying, the wise Christian will practice being God. Be imitators of God, practice being God. Now, how in the world can we do that? But that's what St. Paul is telling us to do. Now, St. Paul is writing this letter to the Ephesians, and so this is a Hellenistic culture. Ephesus was a Greek colony in Asia Minor, so it was in modern-day Turkey, but it was still a Greek town. It was founded by the son of a Athens king. And so I went there years ago on a trip, and just like any kind of Greek city, there is always going to be a Colosseum, or a place where people will come for events and even entertainment. And the main focus of entertainment is usually someone who will give speeches. And so these terms, being an imitator and practice, are oracle terms. Any Greek in the Greco-Roman culture who was educated in rhetoric. And so what St. Paul is talking about is rhetorical terms. The three basic terms in rhetoric, if you want to be a good speaker back in ancient Greece, was theory, imitation, and practice. If you wanted to be a good speaker, the first thing was to know the theory, the how-to. You could learn it from the books and the pamphlets, and you could be a competent speaker. But if you wanted to be a a virtuoso, if you wanted to be a master orator, you had to go beyond that. And the sophists of those times were the virtuosos. And what they did is they became apprentices to the masters, and they imitated the masters. And by imitating them, watching them, learning from them, watching what they did, then they practiced it and practiced over and over again until it became natural to them. Until they became virtuosos. And so St. Paul is basically saying, just as the orators would learn to imitate the great masters, if you wanted to be a great speaker, the same thing in the spiritual life. Imitate the masters. And in this case, the greatest master, the master of all, Jesus Christ. Imitate him, just like all of the saints do. Learn from the great spiritual master. Imitate him and begin with some of the attributes that he speaks of in his letter. Kindness, compassion, forgiveness. These are some of the attributes of God. But still, we look at this exhortation, being an imitator of God, practice being God, and we say to ourselves, how can we do this? It's impossible. I'll fail. You know, there's a story that I share with the kids at our school. I've shared with them a number of times. It kind of answers this question. It's just a fable. It's not true. But it's about a man who had a grotesque face, so deformed that he was ostracized by his community. He lived in a community, in a place where they felt that those who were beautiful and handsome were good, and those who were deformed and ugly were bad, even evil. And so he lived a lonely life. But then one day, he decided to go visit a man who was known to be a master mask maker. And he asked him to make a mask of a saint. And this craftsman was so good at his craft that he made a mask that looked so lifelike that when he put the mask on, people couldn't tell that he was wearing a mask. And people thought that he was a saint, and so now he had to act like a saint so that they would not know who he really was. And so he wore the mask day and night and tried to live like a saint. And soon, he was not ostracized anymore. People started to be drawn to him, and he had friends now. And one in particular was his constant companion. But then one day, his companion noticed that he was wearing a mask. And he asked him to take the mask off, but he didn't want to because he was afraid. He was afraid that if he took the mask off, that he would no longer be his friend anymore. But his friend assured him that his friendship was stronger than anything that he would see. And so reluctantly that he took off the mask, and his friend looked at him, and he paused, and he was puzzled. And he said, "Why do you wear the mask? Your face looks exactly like the mask that you wear." It appears that the actor had become the role that he played. You see, my friends, there's a difference between wearing the mask to appear holy and wearing the mask to become holy. In other words, by God's grace, you fake it until you make it. And basically, that's what St. Paul is telling us to do today. Be imitators of God. And fake it until you make it. Put away the anger, the shouting, the bitterness, and in its place, put the kindness, the attributes of God. Kindness and compassion, forgiveness. Because God knows the world needs more of that today. Amen? God bless you. Yeah,